morning, and thank you everyone for making it today. We requested to interact with you, to give you an update regarding an issue that was brought question time to the First Lady yesterday as she was releasing the A-level results. It was about the progress of the 20 billion His Excellency the President promised to the teachers in private schools. So, just a brief background is that in 2020 mid, around July, as a way of responding to the plight of the private school teachers, the President promised to give them 20 billion shillings to intervene in their issues and give some economic relief due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, it's not funds for the private institutions, it is for the teachers. At the time the promise was made, of course the private teachers were there. They had some loose entities that were bringing them together, but not at a national level. Yet this amount of money that was promised by His Excellency the President was not to be distributed just in a loose manner, but in a very clear structure, to give accountability, but also to ensure that the money is going to the beneficiaries that it is intended for. So the Minister of Education had to take lead in helping the teachers mobilize to come up with a structure which is owned by them and accountable to them. And that structure had to be registered as an entity in government, and the entity that does that is the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. Now, once the Uganda Registration Services Bureau had registered that entity, then it would take on the responsibility of coming up with the details on how that money will be distributed or availed to the beneficiaries through a mechanism that will be agreed upon. Now that mechanism was called a fund manager. Someone had to manage this fund on behalf of the teachers and on behalf of government to ensure that it's not wasted. Now that fund manager that was chosen is the Microfinance Support Center. So yesterday, the Minister of Education signed a memorandum of understanding with this association called the Uganda National Private School Teachers Association, which we are calling UNAPSTA. And that memorandum of understanding clearly gives the responsibility of moving this forward to that association of private school teachers and further engagement with the Microfinance Center to ensure that the monies His Excellency the President promised go to the rightful beneficiaries. Now, on behalf of the Ministry, the Permanent Secretary and the Director of Basic and Secondary Education signed. On behalf of that association, NAPSTA, it was their chairperson and General Secretary. So, allow me now to call upon Mr. Ismail Mlimba to give you a little more details on what I've said or introduced, as well as what that memorandum of understanding means in terms of the responsibility of the Association of Private School Teachers and also the responsibility of the Minister of Education. Mr. Mlimba, you're welcome.
As think Dr. Mugambi really to give at least some kind of background. And I think the picture painted now is a little clearer for you. However, I'm just going to add a few details. And I'll start by saying the money we are talking about initially, if you remember, was supposed to be 2 billions. Then thereafter it was upgraded to 20 billions. I think it's better you get it clear. When the president was talking, he talked about 2 billions. Later, I think when he started with his finance people, it was upgraded to be scaled up to the 20 billions. But one point we need to be clear of, even when we are reporting, this was not meant to be relief money. The teachers would get it, sit in a corner, and share the money. Because His Excellency the President was very categorical. He said, if you remember or if you recall, I'm putting this money in the private teachers' circles. And what did that one mean? That it was supposed to be a revolving fund for all the teachers. Otherwise, if it was to be shared, every teacher would part maybe with maybe 20 or 30. And I think the President was spot on by putting that money in their circle. And at that time, His Excellency the President thought that these teachers were organized to the point of having formed the circles. And because with that gap, it took us some good time to get these teachers organized so that they are able, first of all, to manage the fund, but at the same time form the circles. And as you know, drawing a picture from other funds, it is not that easy to have a circle formed today and registered tomorrow. It's a process. So what happened, we had to engage the beneficiaries, and these are the teachers, because the money was not meant for schools, but for teachers. And the President was very clear. I'm putting this money in the private schools, teachers, circles. So not for private schools. Although some proprietors wanted to be part of this, we guided and said, no, we have to go by His Excellency's directive. So what we did, we engaged the stakeholders, the beneficiaries, the teachers, and we discovered some of the associations which were in place that time, we are not that representative. I want to say this one very clear, and I've been hanged for this personally, that we disregarded the existing associations. No, we didn't. Our key objective was to see all the teachers of Uganda, because that money was not meant for teachers of Wakiso or Kampala. It was meant for teachers of Uganda, whether you're in Kotido, whether you're in Kapilipili, or in Kanungo, Kisoro, you are supposed to benefit from this fund. So having realized that there was a gap in terms of representation, as a minister we guided and said, okay, can we mobilize these teachers from the grassroots? And that's what we did. We engaged our DEOs and the chief administrative officers who mobilized the schools to start forming structures from that point to the district and finally to the national. But I want to say this, or put a disclaimer. There could have been some loose ends here and there, and these structures were being formed. It's understandable. It was their first time. However, the structures were formed up to the national. So as we talk now, Dr. Mugambi has already shared this information, the national structure has been formed. And for us, as a ministry, we are not even so much excited with the 20 billion, but we are more excited by the formation of the structures of the private school teachers. Because I want to confess, we didn't have this kind of arrangement. And members, colleagues, you remember, it wasn't even easy for the government schools fund. It took about 3 years, if I'm correct, for teachers in government schools to access that money. And for me, I believe we have moved to the speed to make sure teachers finally get benefit of this money. So we are more excited with formation of the structures, which we hope are going to help us in many other aspects. But to go back to the fund, the national association is done. Now we have certain MOU, like you say. The MOU was between us and the association on how we are going to work together over this. Because even when we say your money is here, you can manage it, we need to keep advising and guiding on how best this money can be effectively utilized. Because our interest is to see all the teachers benefiting. So when we see divergence here, when we see deviation here, where maybe the top executive is saying, okay, we concentrate in what, so you can come in and say, no, let's have our teachers in Katrobiong, in where, also doing what. So that's why we have that kind of arrangement, and it also introduce this new team to microfinance, so that they can now be accepted, because there's no way they can now hit the door and go to microfinance. Nobody knows them, it's the ministry. And that's where we had even a missing link initially. That's the point at which we intervened and said, no, we need to guide you. We need to guide on the disbursement of this money in terms of who should be the beneficiaries, and the schools and what, and those other details. So that's the picture, that's the detail I wanted to add, but Dr. Mgiba has done it all. We are now praying that they are able to engage microfinance support center, but we cautioned and guided this money, because they were even requesting the money is too little. We said no, first manage this little you have, and when you manage it to really manage it well, maybe you never know the president can, you see, and say we say this money is not for sharing. And we also cautioned them, we said, before you even, because they are not supposed to handle and manage the money. They are supposed to identify somebody, like you say, and for them, they are going to take a supervisory role. They are going to be overseers with the management of this fund. Okay? So they should interact with the Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Microfinance Support Center. Why Ministry of Trade? Because the money is supposed to go to circles. And who is responsible for the circles? I hope you know. That's the guidance we gave, and we hope now it is within their hands. We have done our part. We have delivered what we are supposed to deliver. The rest is simply to introduce them to where the money is, and then they start discussions on how this money is going to reach the beneficiaries. I want to thank you.
So that is the status, and it may look like a small thing, but actually having a structure through which this support can get to the intended beneficiaries was so key. It took some time, but it is worth it. We can now safely say that the private school teachers have a platform, first of all, a voice to speak for them on matters that are even beyond this 20 billion. But we also now know where we can follow for terms of accountability, coordination, to ensure that what was promised by His Excellency the President goes to those to whom it is intended for. So with that, allow me to...
I just want to add this. We guided
this national association to work with other smaller associations, because I wanted to preempt that question. There are other already set organizations, unions, and what? Our concern, like I've already said, was representative. There is no organization you can ask, give me 10,000 teachers, and they present it to you. However, they also have some few. So we say you work with these other unions and organizations so that they are also members and benefit.
Thank you. So let's have questions.
Let's move like this.
I need to clarify here. What formed from the grassroots were not circles. These were associations, structures, out of which now you will have the circles. So the role of these structures at school level, at district level, to form the circles. So the committee at school level can constitute itself and mobilize others, members, to form a circle. Because the formation of a circle has another process. But you should have organs or structures which are going to guide on how these circles are going to be. Because you should have clear objectives which should be articulated by those committees which are elected at school level. So we should be clear between the circles and the associations. Even the national association we are talking of is not a circle yet. I hope you get me clear. It's not a circle yet. It's an association which is supposed to mobilize the formation of circles. I hope I'm clear.
Okay. Yeah, but you did answer all the question. When is the money coming? We've not formed the circle. It's a year. We are giving an update on the status.
Let's be a little, I'm sorry to say, but the president, like I've already said, was very clear. He said, I'm putting this much in the private schools teachers' circles. By then the president thought these private school teachers had circles already formed. We have discovered that private school teachers do not have these circles. We can't have a shortcut. We have to go by the presidential directive. So they have to start forming circles. And incidentally, as we talk now, many of them within this period of this year have already started forming circles. So I believe the moment money comes out of Ministry of Finance, some teachers will start, of course, accessing it, but not 100%. Why? Because there are some areas where the circles are not yet formed. So we are mobilizing the teachers, their association is mobilizing the teachers to form the circles, but some circles already exist. Thank you.
Yes, Denis, you had a question, right?
Yes.
Appreciate the importance of having a structure, because these funds that were promised to the teachers are public funds, and you have to account for every coin where it goes. You would have an uproar of over 330,000 private school teachers complaining that they've not received these funds. So having a structure is more important than even having the money. Now they are owning the whole process. It is not the Minister of Education owning it anymore. So creating ownership of this process was very, very critical. And that is why we took such a laborious process right from the districts to the national level to ensure that they have a single voice. I think you've had situations where government has given funds to some groups and you can't even trace where those groups are. But right now, with this association in place, an apex body, you will be able to trace which SACCO has received what support. That can be traceable. But if we had gone ahead as a ministry and received these funds from finance and simply thrown it out to whichever SACCO, it would be, can you imagine trying to locate 300 associations of SACCOs around the country? But right now, because they are owning the process, they are going to come up with the criteria of who benefits. It is that association that will be able to tell, this Denis is a private school teacher, Ismail is not. So that responsibility is very, very big. The structure is as important as ensuring that the money can be accounted for. And the question that was asked the First Lady yesterday, that's why she told you we were still sorting out the legalities. Now the legality was, what is that legal structure that will be the voice for the private school teachers? That structure was not there, and now it is in place. Now that structure, we are going to support it as a ministry as they move forward to engage with the process of having that money put on the accounts of the respective SACCOs. So it is not one national SACCO for private school teachers. No, they are SACCOs. So this is an apex body. The money is not going to be put into one SACCO. They are SACCOs, as Mr. Mwimbo has explained, already there. Now, some of them will get the money earlier because they have already established SACCOs. Those that do not have, this national body called NAPSTA is going to mobilize them to ensure that they also get SACCOs so that they receive the support.
I should add something.
We cannot say that tomorrow, because as we said, after we have had this NAPSTA, it's the National Association of Private School Teachers. It is in place. It is going to be their voice in the Microfinance Support Center. First of all, by the way, there was not agreement initially. There was no agreement on who should manage these funds. The private school teachers had different options. But then they agreed that the Microfinance Support Center is the one going to manage this fund for them. Okay? Now, these may look like small things, but in managing a 20 billion revolving fund, it is critical to have structures in place. Otherwise, you'll be having here press conferences, handling complaints of private school teachers not receiving support through their SACCOs. Now, to answer the when, we are going to introduce it because we signed this MOU between the NAPSTA, the Association of Private School Teachers, and the Ministry of Education, spelling out our responsibilities. Now, we are going to introduce them to the Microfinance Center and say, these are the people you should be dealing with. And they should be the ones that say, this SACCO is for the private school teachers. Let them receive funds. Otherwise, without that, the Ministry of Education does not have any capabilities within its structure to identify which SACCO is of private teachers, which one is not. We don't have that capability because our capabilities as a ministry is not managing these SACCOs. So having the teachers form their own structure is a very, very critical first step. They are the ones who will say, now send these funds to SACCO so and so, because that SACCO is of private school teachers. Without this NAPSTA in place, you are going to find all sorts of people forming fake SACCOs and saying they are private school teachers. But it is the responsibility of this association to verify and say, this SACCO, even if it is legitimately registered, is not for private school teachers. Therefore, it cannot receive that support. And once that is done, they are not going to wait for 1,000 SACCOs to be formed. Those that are ready, they will be getting their funds immediately. Yes.
Yes,
You've actually said.
Number one, as you heard His Excellency the President say, this should be a support to the teachers' SACCOs, private teachers' SACCOs. It is a revolving fund. Therefore, it is continuous within them. It's not a one-off saying that once we give you your money, we are done with you. This system, Microfinance Support Center and NAPSTA, needs to ensure that actually that fund survives. It is the responsibility of NAPSTA and Microfinance Center to ensure that the 20 billion revolving fund survives. Okay? Then, of course, you and I know that SACCOs don't have the same membership. So, NAPSTA, the National Association of Private School Teachers, is going to come up with modalities. They are the ones going to come up with operational modalities on how much is going to be accessed to whichever SACCO. That is not the role of the Minister of Education. And that is why right from the start, we were saying we want the private school teachers to own this. And we are glad that this legal issue has been sorted out. Otherwise, the Minister of Education was going to be accused of mismanaging this SACCO by us technocrats taking on the responsibilities of what the teachers should have done in the first place. So ownership of the process is important.